What's up, people? Welcome into Daily Betslip. I'm Ben Heisler. With me is Donnavan Smoot, fresh off a nice little vacation. Donnavan, it's good to see you, man. How are you?
I'm
Feeling
doing I'm doing good, Ben. What's going on?
Not too much. Before we get started, I know you gave us a little bit of insight, and we have a really fun show ahead for you on the program today. We'll go into our best bets for this Tuesday night coming up in just a couple minutes. We are going to take a look at some teams in the NFL whose division odds might actually offer up some intriguing value to go from worst in their division to first ahead of the upcoming season. And it's, of course, our game of the night, the Chicago Sky and New York Liberty. A little WNBA winner take all action in the first round. Two of the biggest markets, two of the most impactful teams in the sport. We're going to break that down for you. Give you guys our best bets coming up a little bit later on in the program. But you got a chance to swim with dolphins, dude. I've never had that experience before. The closest I've swam with like an actual water animal is I got to do that with like stingrays maybe 12, 13 years ago. But dolphins, like right up close and personal to you, that must have been a hell of an experience.
No, it was very fire. It was mad fire. And I had to I was actually picking between like the Stingrays and the Dolphins, but
I think you're in the right decision.
I think I did too because I listen after RPC Berwin, the guy, I saw that and I was like, that's not happening to me. So I so we went with the Dolphins, and it was so cool. I rode on the Dolphin's stomach. The Dolphin gave me a little kiss on cheek right here, or shaking hands with it. It was super cool. And I was saying you like the Dolphins in real life, they don't feel real. It still just feels like it was like a made up animal. But it was such a cool experience though.
That's awesome. And for anybody that hasn't had a chance to do something like that, you only live once, man. So go ahead and if you get a chance to go swim with dolphins or swim with any sort of fun creatures, again, like I would encourage it on the like excursion part, not just go deep sea diving and
A hundred
all of a
percent,
sudden you might see a shark, and that's not for me. But this felt like a solid controlled environment for swimming with dolphins.
100%.
Yeah, you had the backup there. Before we dive into our best bets of the night, I do want to mention a crazy game that took place yesterday out in Wrigley Field. The Chicago Cubs hosting the St. Louis Cardinals. And I suppose like nothing sort of out of the ordinary, Donovan, happened for it to be considered like a brutal beat. But the St. Louis Cardinals were fairly heavy favorites against the Cubs last night, to the point where Jordan Montgomery, who's been the best pitcher since the trade deadline, goes for St. Louis. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, if you got a Cardinals run line bet -1.5 against the Cubs team that's been playing better in August, but still one of the worst teams in baseball, you go out there, your pitcher throws a complete game shutout, and you still lose on the run line by the score of 1-0. That's a rough go. Jordan Montgomery, once again, brilliant. I think he's given up maybe one run since coming over to St. Louis. This is a guy that the Yankees really could use right now in the back end of the rotation, but they felt like they could move on from him for one of the guys that's starting tonight in Frankie Montas.
Yeah, I don't listen, and I have a Frankie Montage pick later in the show, so we'll get to that. But for it just has to hurt, like for literally everything to go right, and you have the best game from a pitcher that you could have, and just a 1-0 win against a terrible Cubs team, that has to hurt. That has to hurt.
Yeah. So rough go. Obviously a fairly entertaining game, but from the betting side, that's not typically what you're looking for. Although I will say it was a win for us over at BetSided, considering that Albert Pujols, the 42-year-old ageless wonder, has found a way to come back and take on the Chicago Cubs, a team that he destroyed for so many years while he was in St. Louis, and proceed to be the only person to hit a home run. So he was our daily dinger pick over at BetSided, but that's just not the way that you want to see it go. He's 42 years old. That's the only run you give up on the day. Brutal beat for anybody that had the Cardinals on the run line. So let's take that. Let's wipe the slate clean, move on to our best bets here on a Tuesday night. Looking at the rundown for today, Donovan, you are all over the player prop market when it comes to baseball tonight. I'm on a prop play, and I'm also going to give you a little sneak peek at the WNBA game 3 between the Connecticut Sun and the Dallas Wings for tomorrow night. So a little sneak peek before the line maybe starts to move. So let's go back and forth on this before we get started. We do have somebody that weighed in on their best bets of the night. So we got one play to share with you guys, and we'll break it down here. Who do we have for today? This is from MWRLV, Baltimore Orioles money line. So the Orioles, they've been a fun story over the course of this year, Donovan, and they're still hanging around. I wrote an article over today at BetSided about how they're the only team so far in baseball that has actually passed their win total, and it's still the middle of August. But they're hosting the Chicago White Sox is fairly – I'm actually kind of surprised that they're not bigger underdogs because they're going up against Dylan Cease. And they're plus 115 at home. But Dylan Cease, as you know, man, other than Justin Verlander, he's been the best pitcher in the American League this year and someone that I believe has a legitimate chance to win the Cy Young. You'd think Baltimore would probably be even bigger underdogs, but right now nobody can trust this White Sox team. So what do you think of Baltimore money line plus 115 tonight?
I don't know, because I saw the exact same thing that you saw when I looked at this matchup, is the fact that Dylan Cease is on the mound, and so your initial instinct is just to blindly take the White Sox. I mean, Cease he's just been fantastic. You look over his last 5 starts, he's only allowed 6 runs, and 3 of them came against the Astros in his last start. But he had 3 straight starts of 1 run allowed, and then didn't allow a run in his last start against the Guardians. So I think I'm going to back the White Sox today, and I'm going to back Cease just because he's just that good. And it's like we were talking about with the bad beat, you get a good dominant pitching performance that sets you up very, very well for everything else that you need to fall in your favor. So I'll side with Chicago today. But it is very interesting to see Baltimore not as bigger underdogs.
Yeah, he's been responsible for a lot of the White Sox wins this year, and they haven't had a lot of them. They're still hanging around trying to fight for an AL Central spot. That's probably their best path to the postseason, given all the quality teams in the American League. So I'll say this. Baltimore, they've been dominant at home, probably the best. I think they're the best home team on the run line over the course of this year. In fact, they are the best run line team in baseball. So if you're going to go ahead and back Baltimore, maybe that's the play. Maybe expect a close game and take Baltimore on the run line instead. But money line, the White Sox know how desperate they are, and they need a win, especially when Dylan Cease is on the mound. So I'll probably go the other side, and you and I will probably check it out the next day, and we'll see the Orioles win by the score of 2-1 and feel a little bit silly about ourselves. But there you have it. Good play, though. An intriguing play with Austin Voth on the mound going up against Dylan Cease. But let's go into our best bets for tonight. I know you got 3 props across the board, so let's just go back and forth. I'll have you start. We'll do a little bit of baseball back and forth, and then I'll reveal my WNBA pick for tomorrow's action. So go ahead and kick things off. Which is your favorite prop among your 3 to kick things off for today?
Yeah, so I think my favorite today, I'm going over on Carlos Rodon's strikeouts. The line is at 7.5. It's at minus 134 over at FanDuel, and we kind of we know what Carlos Rodon is. He's a great strikeout pitcher. He does this very, very often. That's why his line is consistently set kind of very high. He's hit this line in 3 of his last 5 starts, and in the 2 misses that he had, one of them was by a single strikeout, right? So he's always by this line, and he has a really good matchup today against the Tigers. Detroit, the 22nd in Major League Baseball in strikeouts per game, the 27th in strikeout percentage. I think that the only thing that can cause Rodon to kind of miss this line is if it's a short day for him, and if Detroit just comes out and the bats are swinging, then obviously I don't see him having a good game. But Detroit is they're just not a good team. And so if Rodon can stay on the mound for, 5-6 innings, this seems kind of like an easy line for me.
I think the play makes a lot of sense, especially with somebody like Rodon who can get very strikeout heavy. And I'll be honest, I was thinking he might be a prime candidate to regress a little bit in the second half of the season. The Giants were somewhat out of the race. He kind of fell apart in the second half of last year, but I mean, the strikeout numbers are there fairly consistently. He's striking out a little less than 32% of batters, coming off an 11 strikeout game against Arizona tonight. So you know that he can get to that level. It's just a question of how long he's going to be able to go in some of these games. So I think the over on Rodon, normally those high strikeouts, we like to fade, but I think this is a matchup that sets up awfully well for Carlos Rodon tonight. As for a prop that I like, I'm going to go with a number that I found to be fairly surprising, and I jumped on this early. The line has since moved. I think the smallest that you can find it right now is at BetMGM, and that's Mike Clevenger, over 3.5 strikeouts. I got it at minus 135 earlier today. He's missed this number in his last 3 starts. And now he faces a team in the Guardians that are actually the toughest strikeout team in baseball. But 3.5 still feels like a number that he can get to. And the reason that I think he can get to is because the last 3 starts that he had all came on the road. And he just has not had the same type of numbers away from Petco Park as he's had in Petco Park. So in his last 3 starts, 14 innings, his strikeout per 9 is actually lower than his walks per 9 innings. His control has not been good. And on the road, he's barely getting above 7 strikeouts per 9. But when he comes back home, the walk rate goes down and the strikeout rate goes up by nearly 2 full strikeouts per game. He's faced Cleveland already this year. That was coming off of the knee injury. He got 4 strikeouts in that game, which would have passed his over there. He knows how to play against this team. It's his former team. Still knows a lot of those guys that are there. And he's back at a familiar place where he's had his most success since he's come to San Diego. So I think 3.5 is a too low of a number, even for someone like Clevenger, who's been so up and down. I'm going to go ahead and back him to look more like the Clevenger we know compared to the one that we've seen over his last 3 starts.
Yeah, and I actually want. So, how confident? And I guess everybody's always confident in the best that they play. But how confident are you in this one? Because if you look kind of around the market, the 3.5 number and the fact that you got it at 135 is great. But like the 3.5 number is very, very juiced. At some places it's up to like 170, 187. So you've seen a couple books move it up to 4.5, and you kind of get a little bit a better price. And so if like I'm looking right now, so at one book, it's 4.5 at minus 105. And so for a lot of people who might get it at that number, do you like that number as well as 3.5?
If it were at plus odds, I would like it more. If it's minus 105, like if you're willing to jump on it at 4 at around maybe minus 110, minus 120, there's some books that I'm seeing that have it at 4 as opposed to 4.5, then I feel like it's a little bit more reasonable. 4.5, and you're already at minus something odds. That's probably a stay away. I just think he can get past 3.5 against Cleveland. Like the number from earlier today made the most amount of sense, and I still think a lot of the juice is worth it. 4 is probably reasonable. 4.5, you can still get plus odds for it, and I know some books do offer it. I think that's okay. I'd probably bet it up to 4.5, and that would be the maximum one if you can still get plus value for it.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so I have another strikeout prop. I'm gonna go with the under on Pablo Lopez's strikeouts. His line is at 5.5, minus 115 odds. And it's weird because normally I like betting on Pablo Lopez, but he's kind of regressed a little bit in the second half of this season, and he's missed his line in 3 of his last 5 starts. He had an 11 strikeout game against the Reds towards the end of July, but in the last 4, he's had 2 strikeouts, 4 strikeouts, 6 strikeouts, and then 1. And he's playing the A's tonight. And Oakland, even though that they are not a good team, they're actually semi-decent in terms of strikeouts per game. They're 15th in Major League Baseball in strikeouts per game. They're just outside the bottom third in strikeout percentage. So I think that Oakland is going to be able to kind of stay afloat with Lopez on the mound today. He's had kind of like a rough go in terms of innings pitched. He pitched 4 2/3 in his last time out. He hasn't gone past 6. He's only gone past 6 innings once in his last 5 starts. So I think we're probably going to see a shorter day from him. And once you put that on top of the fact that the A's, can probably just tread water. I don't think we're going to see a really, really good day from Lopez.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting play, especially that Lopez really. We were talking about this guy in the early portion of the season as someone that could be a dark horse for the Cy Young, and he's really fallen off a cliff over the last handful of starts. Miami has been one of those teams that have gotten by with their starting pitching through most of the year, and other than Sandy Alcantara and Edward Cabrera, this team is really starting to fall apart, getting absolutely nothing offensively, and that puts a lot more pressure on your starting pitching. And as for Lopez, you're right, like at one point there were a lot more swings and misses, and teams have adjusted to him. So I can totally see the under on 5.5 playing out for tonight's game as well. One play that I like in Major League Baseball tonight, Donovan, is in Colorado. The Rockies are hosting the Texas Rangers. And I like Texas as a kind of like a money line, even odds, plus 100. Probably bet them up to minus 110 as well. This is just not a good matchup for Colorado. The Rangers have actually started to hit the ball a little bit better. You have plenty of power bats going into Coors Field. And also this is, a fade on German Marquez. At home, he's been a complete and total disaster. And on the road, he's been substantially better. So in home games this year, in 72 and a third innings, German Marquez has a 5.85 ERA. Opponents are hitting 307 against them, and he's given up 15 out of his 21 home runs at home. He's also just not striking out a lot of batters at all. And even though his numbers have been slightly better in the month of August, they're still really bad, and they've still given up plenty of home runs in the month as well. As for Dane Dunning, he's got better stuff than German Marquez at this point, but the strikeout rate isn't that great. And to be honest, as long as he keeps the ball down, he throws that curveball, throws a cutter to try and get it on the hands as well. I think he'll actually be okay. He's also coming off a win in his last start. Had the 6 strong innings against Oakland. I just, anytime German Marquez is in a spot where he's a slight favorite at some sports books, I want nothing to do with it. And so that's why I'm saying I would take the Rangers, even if they end up flipping to be the favorite at wherever sportsbook you're betting. But right now I got them at plus 100, and I love them tonight on the road.
Yeah, I think, listen, I like that play, and I kind of like betting against the Rockies whenever they're away from home, because you look at their OPS, and when they're at home, they actually have the best OPS in the league. They're at their OPS is at 805.
Mm-hmm.
You put them on the road, and they drop all the way down from first to 26th in Major League Baseball. That OPS drops to 642. So anytime that you can get them on the road and fade them, and with the team that you're backing at plus money, I really like that play.
Yeah, Rangers especially, and again, just to avoid confusion, Rangers are in Colorado, so that's part of the reason that Marquez is a concern for me. You're right, Colorado.
I got that flipped.
Yeah. So Colorado, I agree with you. Like, they hit way better at home, but again, I think Dunning. Listen, the total is 10.5. You're going to see runs on both sides. But Dunning, because of the cutter that he's starting to throw, I think he's going to induce a little bit more ground balls, do a better job of keeping the ball down, which Marquez has shown. Just can't do it in Colorado. Stuff plays a lot better away from Denver than it does in Denver, at least from the research that I've done.
Yeah. Listen, I got that mixed up. But
listen,
I still like the play though. I still like the play.
Even better. All right, you got one more MLB prop on the board. What's it going to be?
Yeah, so I'm going with the under on Frankie Montas strikeouts, under 4.5 strikeouts, plus 115 in the Subway Series. And listen, I don't really know what's up with the Yankees. We've been talking about it since before the All-Star break started, but they've just been on a decline for the better part of, I guess, like 2 months now. And you think you would, you kind of thought that they're going to trade for Frankie Montas. Maybe he's the spark that's going to get them back on track. That hasn't necessarily been the case. Montas hasn't had a great first 3 starts as a Yankee. He's missed this line in all 3 of his starts. He's finished with just 2 strikeouts twice, and his ERA over his last 3 starts is close to double digits. It's at 9. So I think that this entire Yankees team just has an aura about them where I just don't feel confident kind of backing them on anything. Montas, in his 3 games as the Yankees starting pitcher, he's given up nearly 5 runs per outing, and he hasn't cleared 6 innings in 1 start. So he's incredibly inefficient. I think the Mets with their great lineup, they're probably going to beat up on him tonight. So let's count this as a light day for Frankie Montas and take the under.
Boy, don't you, if you're the Yankees, don't you wish that you just had Jordan Montgomery still hanging around right now? Because, I mean, I liked the trade for Montes when it happened. I thought this was somebody that could actually play well in Yankee Stadium. But, I mean, his splits this year, compared to his numbers when he was pitching in Oakland, they're just night and day. And since he's gotten to New York, he's really, really struggled with command. He's given up some long balls. This is someone that's supposed to keep the ball down a little bit in a hitter-friendly park. It has not happened whatsoever for Montas this year. So fully on board. Yeah, I think this is not an ideal spot against the Mets lineup that's been very patient this year, tough to strike out. So the fact that you're getting into plus odds, I certainly like that play as well. Let me give you a little sneak peek on the WNBA board tomorrow night. So the Connecticut Sun in a winner-take-all game that they have against the Dallas Wings. The Sun are the 3 seed. Dallas is the number 6 seed. And one thing that's actually been effective for me, Donovan, so far over the course of betting on the WNBA so far has been a lot of like first quarter, first half types of bets. And that's what I'm going to do in this game as well. Give me the Sun first half -3 against Dallas. So I was looking at some of these numbers and trying to, to factor out, okay, which of these teams have gotten off to good starts. And both Dallas and Connecticut are good first quarter teams this year. In fact, Dallas is actually a better first quarter team, especially since the start of August, than that of Connecticut. They actually have a better net rating than the Sun. But when you move on to the actual first half itself, it becomes a completely different story. The Sun have fared much better in the second quarter of games against Dallas. It seems like the Wings kind of use up a bunch of energy early on, and then Connecticut starts to make a roll. Now, it was a little too late in game 2 in Connecticut. And part of the issue there is that the Suns scored 7 points in the first quarter at home. Now the series moves back to Dallas. Connecticut actually has put up really good numbers on the road when it comes to their first half season stats. And I think they're going to come out and play with a little bit more aggressiveness, be it the defensive team that led the WNBA net rating over the course of this year. There's going to be just more opportunities for them, I think, to bounce back, make some of the adjustments that they need, especially with no Arike Ogunbowale. So first half -3 as opposed to trying to chase the 6 or 7 points that they'll need against a team that's actually gone 3-2 against them over the course of the season and the postseason. So I like the Sun -3 in the first half. Feel like it's a really reasonable number for Connecticut to be able to back, given how good they've been in the first half, particularly on the road.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that play a lot, and it's for all the reasons that you said as well, but it's also because Dallas, even when whether they have Arike or they don't, they're really good against the spread, and they're as good as the Sun are. The Sun are 21-15 against the spread this year. Dallas is 21-14-1, and so if you're looking at kind of like the full game, and you expect Connecticut to eventually pull away from them, I think being able to get them at this lower line and basically saying like, okay, we're going to be 2 possessions better than Dallas in the first half. I think this is a really, really smart way of being able to back Connecticut in this game.
Yeah, and what's crazy too is that on the road, Dallas actually has the best net rating since August in the first half. But all of a sudden you throw them in at home and those numbers change, and they're no longer that dominant first half team. In fact, it actually goes to Connecticut on the road. So something to consider for that game. And again, you don't have to worry about trying to figure out whether or not Connecticut will cover at the very end. You're just worried about the first half. So Connecticut -3 in tomorrow night's WNBA game. Before we dive into some fun NFL futures and talking about a couple worst to first teams, let's take a look back at our best bets of the night. Donovan is going with the over 7.5 on strikeouts for Carlos Rodon of the San Francisco Giants, and then a couple more unders on the strikeout props, under 5.5 for Pablo Lopez of the Miami Marlins, and under 4.5 for Frankie Montas of the New York Yankees. As for my best bets of the night, give me the over on 3.5 Mike Clevenger strikeouts. Again, I would bet that number up to 4 if you can find it at plus value at 4.5. I think that's still a reasonable play as well. Rangers plus 100 on the road against Colorado, and then the Sun first half -3 in tomorrow's winner-take-all WNBA game between Connecticut and Dallas. All right, Donovan, let's have a little bit of fun talking about something that we are accustomed to seeing pretty much every year in the NFL, and that's the team that goes from worst to first. Last year, the Cincinnati Bengals surprised all of us. We knew that there was talent on this team. We just didn't expect it to completely come out the way they did in one of the tougher divisions in the NFL. But not only do they go out and take care of business within the division, but they also go and make it all the way to the Super Bowl. I don't know if we're going to see that from a worst to first team in 2022, but I do think there are a handful of teams that are worth consideration. And I do think that there's probably one team at the top of the list that not only we're looking at, but the odds makers are backing to be that team as well. And I think that's the team that you're eyeing as your pick this year.
Yeah, and even though that plus money still feels kind of chalk because the obvious answer is to go with the Baltimore Ravens, and that's exactly who I'm going with. They're plus 145 to win the AFC North. And listen, the Ravens, even with all the injury stuff that happened to them last year, losing their top three running backs, Marcus Peters being out for the year, Lamar Jackson being in and out of the lineup with injuries, they still finished at 8-9, and they were 2 games out of the division title. And so, like, you look at the team, you look at the infrastructure that they have. They haven't had great wide receiver play for the last, I would say, 2 years, and they're still able to get things done. John Harbaugh he's gonna have them coached up right. The defense is gonna be healthier this year. They're gonna have the running backs. They're just healthier this year,
Yeah.
and so I think that they're in a prime position to make that jump. You have the Browns, who are going to be without Deshaun Watson for the first 11 games. You have the Bengals, who, even though a lot of people are expecting them to take this jump, I don't think that they're taking a jump to 13 and to like a 13-4 record. I think that they're still going to be kind of around where the Ravens are. And then the Steelers, while I expect them to be decent because they always are, they're not. I don't think that they're serious division contenders. And so when you look at the Ravens, who last year, out of all the teams that finished last in their respective divisions, the Ravens had the best point differential. Their point differential was a -5. They were as average as you can get with playing as little actual starting caliber players in the NFL as possible. You give them a healthy roster, you give them John Harbaugh, who is one of the best coaches in the league, and you get a team that's going to be back, and they're going to be back at the top of the division.
Yeah, and the odds makers agree with that assessment. Most consensus sportsbooks have the Ravens as the team to beat in the AFC North, so they're anticipating it as well. I'll say this about the Ravens because I agree with that pick. And just to make things a little bit different, there's another team that I'm considering as well, which I'll get to in just a second. But Cincinnati, I think there's a lot of expectation that this team could regress a little bit. In the upcoming season, they've had a lot of things go their way, especially down the stretch of last year. You had Burrow stay healthy throughout the course of the season. You had your wide receiving core for the most part stay healthy. Offensive line, defensive line. This was a team that was fairly healthy throughout the course of the season. And a lot of times those tend to flip on you, especially with a lot of trends concerning Super Bowl teams that did not end up winning. So I have some concerns about Cincinnati. Pittsburgh obviously taking a step in the other direction. Cleveland, we're just not sure what it's going to be because Deshaun Watson's going to be out for those 11 games. Can they keep the ship going without him, with Jacoby Brissett in the mix? But I think there's so much to like about this Baltimore team. I think Rashad Bateman takes a massive step in the right direction. This was somebody that put up really solid numbers when him and Lamar Jackson were on the field together, but they just weren't on the field together enough. Mark Andrews led all tight ends in receiving yards last year. And then the defense gets so many guys back. Marlon Humphrey back in the safety spot is going to be big. Marcus Peters, his ability to take the ball away. Like I almost think you can look at Baltimore and say, just Lamar Jackson aside, the defense might be one of the best in the NFL, and that could help propel them to the top of the division.
Yeah, I think that they are going to have to play probably a different style of defense this year because they are very, very blitz heavy, and they like to blitz. They like to put their corners out on islands, and so we'll have to see if their corners can hold up. But listen, the defense, obviously, there were a lot of situations last year where they just couldn't play the style of football that they wanted to effectively. And now that you're getting everybody back, it's going to be obviously kind of a regression to what you normally do. And And so I think that they're going to be in a better position. And then obviously on top of that, you get Lamar Jackson back, who is an automatic top 7 quarterback, arguably top 5, depending on who I'm talking to. That's obviously going to put you in a much better position. So I think that the Ravens are a great pick to win the AFC, to win the AFC North. I think that they have value to even win the AFC. I mean, we'll see what the receiving core looks like, because ultimately I think that that's going to be kind of the deciding factor on how explosive their offense can be. But they have a chance because they have Lamar Jackson. So I like the Ravens this year.
Yeah, Ravens make a ton of sense. Let me give you a team that I think is probably more so in that dark horse candidate to go from worst to first. But based on everything around them and based on kind of the circumstances that they find themselves in, it wouldn't shock me if they end up being that play. And that's the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're coming in right now at plus 700 to win the AFC South this year. And really the only team that I see as the team that's going to get in their way is the Indianapolis Colts. But if Matt Ryan goes down for any foreseeable reason, then you're looking at Jacksonville, I think, as the likely favorite to win that division, even against Tennessee, who had one of the better teams in all of the NFL a season ago. And it's just because Trevor Lawrence, who we both looked at, and I don't know if I should say we both, but I think the consensus outlook on Lawrence was this was in the conversation of can't miss prospects in the NFL, right? Like in the same conversation as Andrew Luck coming out of school at Clemson. And you saw the complete negligence from Urban Meyer running that football team a season ago. The moment he got out of there, Lawrence immediately started playing better, started to get the completion rate up. The offense had a little bit more creativity to it. He was just presented in a terrible spot. And now you bring in a big boy head coach in Doug Peterson, who's won a Super Bowl, who's had success running modern offensive schemes in his past. And now it's an opportunity for Lawrence to take that massive step that so many quarterbacks in the league have done from year 1 to year 2. Now, the difference is guys like Mahomes and Lamar Jackson did it under the same coaching regimes, but if it's Trevor Lawrence, you welcome this opportunity now. And between the amount of spending that Jacksonville did to fix up some of their wide receiver issues, to fix up the offensive line, they added some more pressure up front. Their secondary situation is going to be better. And Jacksonville could be that sneaky team that plays hard in a terrible division, that takes care of business against some of the worst teams, has a very favorable schedule, and all of a sudden makes it really interesting. And if it's between them and the Indianapolis Colts, if Lawrence takes that step, then Jacksonville could be that team at 7-1 odds to go from worst to first and win the AFC South, which isn't a good division in the first place.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that the only thing that would make me like the Jaguars more is if they were on Hard Knocks and I could see them like every week and I can fall into the Hard Knocks propaganda. That would be the only thing that would make me kind of, like them as the darlings for this year. I think Doug Peterson is going to make life very, very easy for Trevor Lawrence. They're going to run a ton of RPOs. You have 2 good backs in James Robinson and in Travis Etienne. I think that you're finally going to see kind of, some type of progression from the Jaguars. You're going to see them play an actual NFL offense. And even Trevor Lawrence, even though that he had, if I'm not mistaken, I think he had more interceptions than touchdowns last year. And
He did.
yeah, and so he had 12 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. I don't think of Trevor Lawrence as an turnover prone quarterback. I don't think that that's who he is in the NFL. So if you can cut down on those interceptions, maybe just because the scheme is a little bit better and you have just a little bit more weapons, you have Christian Kirk there who can play in the slot and do a couple things. You're going to see the Jaguars. They're going to be better, right? You can't be there's not much there's so much there's only so much worse that you can play than what they did last year. They're going to be better. Just I guess how much better is the question, but I think that with Doug Peterson there, the offense is going to be extremely better.
Yeah, it'll be competent, which is more than what we can say from a season ago. And competency plus stability in the NFL can usually lead to winning success. And Lawrence, I do think, is going to take that step. And yeah, I mean, Christian Kirk isn't going to move the needle as far as a top addition, but you have him, you have Zay Jones, you brought in Evan Ingram on a 1-year deal. He put up some bad numbers with the Giants the last couple of years, but maybe a fresh start. And listen, Doug Peterson knows how to use tight ends during his time in Philadelphia. So maybe all of a sudden Ingram wakes up and that's another pass catching weapon. They short up the offensive line. Like, there's a lot to feel good about with Jacksonville towards at least getting back to respectability with the hiring of Peterson, and also having Trevor Lawrence be able to learn from a lot of the mistakes that were presented to him a season ago. So we got two teams. We got Baltimore plus 145 to win the AFC North. I like Jacksonville plus 700 to win the AFC South as far as teams to go from worst to first. Speaking of worst to first, at one point, the New York Liberty, Donovan, were the worst team in the WNBA. Tonight, they are home in Brooklyn to have an opportunity to knock out the defending champion Chicago Sky. That is, of course, our game of the night. Over at BetSided for the Daily Betslip tonight, the Sky are 7-point favorites on the road in a winner-take-all game 3 in Brooklyn. Total on this game comes in at 165.5. Man, it's been a fun postseason in the WNBA as far as betting. We've had some really strong last weeks or so over at BetSided, but let's put our heads together here for the people. Where are you going with this play? Who do you like, and what's going to be your best bet for tonight?
Yeah, so I like the Liberty tonight, and but on the spread though,
Okay.
I'm not gonna come out and say that they're gonna win the game outright. I like them plus 7.5, and I think that, listen, Chicago has had 2 blowouts of the Liberty. They obviously trounced them the other day in game 2, and then their first meeting of the year, Chicago blew them out by like 23 points. Their last 3 regular season meetings, however, have been decided by a total of 13 points. Yep. And one of those games was an 8-point win, another one was a 3-point win, and then you had a 2-point win after that. New York can stay close with Chicago. They've proved it all season long, and that 23-point win that Chicago had in the regular season, that was the first meeting of the year. So that was before New York kind of figured a couple things out. I think that Chicago, they're in a dogfight now. And New York has shown plenty times over that they're not scared of Chicago. So I think that Sabrina Ionescu, who is having a pretty good series, she's going to be able to do a couple of things. And you look at a game where you get beat by 38 points. There's only up to go. You can only go up from there, and I think that New York takes that step forward and at least keeps it competitive. I don't think that I wouldn't pick them to win. That wouldn't be my best bet, but I think that they will be able to keep it close.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's part of the reason why it makes me a little bit nervous to take a side here, because I do envision a scenario where this game goes down to the wire, and then it's just a matter of whether or not the Sky lock up on the Liberty defensively like they did in game 2 and completely neutralizes Ionescu. Howard isn't able to get anything going, and the Liberty just shut down offensively, or they kind of push on Chicago like they did in game 1. And Chicago also made some bad plays down the stretch in game 1. They had a 6-point lead, 3.5 minutes to go, and just could not get it done when it absolutely needed to. So I'm probably staying away from the side. But if I had to go ahead and go a couple different ways, I mentioned on Twitter earlier today, Donovan, that I have 4 bets on this game, and 3 of them all take place in the first quarter. So let me give you a couple of them here today on the show. So the first play that I like is on the total under for this game, under 165.5, because both these teams actually down the stretch of the season were very good defensive teams. In fact, looking at the numbers for the New York Liberty at home this year, man, like since August, this has been one of the better defensive teams in the league. Defensive rating since August at home, the New York Liberty rank second behind only the Connecticut Sun at 90.8. Now, Chicago has had a little bit of issues defensively down the stretch, but all of a sudden that changes for them on the road. You get out of Chicago, they don't push as much pace, and the Sky on the road actually have the second best defensive rating. So New York at home, second best defensive rating since August. On the road, Chicago, second best defensive rating since August. I think this is going to be that grinded out game that New York actually wants to play, because that's the type of game that's going to keep them in it. If Chicago pushes pace and New York doesn't score, this game is going to be over in the first quarter like it was in game 2. But in game 1, both these teams played a little bit more half-court offense, and then the Liberty got into better defensive sets, and they were able to dictate pace, and they ended up winning that game because they kept themselves in it with their defense. So I like the under in this game as well. A couple other side bets that I like for the first quarter. I like the Sky -2, I believe, in the first quarter for today as well. They've dominated New York in the first, outscored them by 25 points in the first 2 games. And also the under 42 in the first quarter as well. Figure if you're playing the under when it comes to the entire game, first quarter has been when both of these teams have played really, really well defensively in their respective locations. So we're not just giving you 1 or 2 picks on the game tonight, Donovan. We're giving you like 3 or 4. That's what we do here on BetSlip, especially when you and I are on and are able to talk a little bit of WNBA in the mix. We brought up the poll to all of you guys that were watching here on YouTube as well as on Twitter. They're going with the favorites, Donovan. They are fading your pick of the New York Liberty +7.5. They're going with the Chicago Sky, the defending champs, to go into Brooklyn and put up the performance that they need to move on to likely face the winner of Dallas and Connecticut. Actually, it wouldn't be likely. It would be the winner of Dallas and Connecticut who play tomorrow night. So the audience is going with the Sky. You're going with the Liberty +7.5. I have the under in this game, 165.5, as well as the first quarter under, and the Sky -2 in the first quarter. So all the bets that you could possibly imagine for the Sky and Liberty tonight are available on the board for you here from the show. Really fun stuff. Enjoyed our conversation. Appreciate all you guys watching us on YouTube, weighing in on Twitter as well. Both Don and I will be off tomorrow for Daily Betslip. It'll be Ian and Peter bringing down the show tomorrow. Donovan, prediction for tonight. I know you said that the Liberty will cover the 7.5, but do they move on?
No. I will take I think the Sky will win tonight, and they will win 83-77.
83-77. So that would be 160 for the final score. That would be an under. Let's roll with that. I'm gonna just go ahead.
83-77.
83-77, under 165. Liberty cover the +7.5, and we will go ahead and report back to you tomorrow for our best bets in the WNBA, plus all the best bets that you can have for Major League Baseball, everything else on the board as well. So for my guy Donovan, I'm Ben. Shout out to Joanne, our producer and director. We will see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. East Coast time for a brand new edition of Daily Betslip. May all of your best bets hit. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. So long.